And I have a rule of thumb, which is unless I'm willing to pay as much for it as it's going to sell for, then I should probably sell it. And I didn't want to sell that, but I got $900 for it. Hello everybody, welcome back to one of the Commonwealth channels. I'm not sure if this is on Picker or Flipper. Sometimes I have video ideas. Most of the time I'm going to put a video like this on Commonwealth Flipper, but who the heck knows? I get busy sometimes, and sometimes I'll stick one on the other channel. At any rate, this was an idea for a video that was born out of a visit that I made to Patriot Picker, and I thought I would do something with him as a new reseller, and so I consigned some clothes that I had bought in a lot off of another reseller to him to hopefully get him started on clothing. And I went over to his house and ended up doing kind of an impromptu interview. He interviewed me, and he asked me a question, and I can't remember exactly what the question was, but it got me thinking really immediately while I was sitting there in that chair about some of the items that kind of got me hooked on reselling. And so it got me thinking about some of the early items I had sold and some of my favorite picks. And I guess I can't remember all of them. I wish I almost had a list of everything I've ever sold, just so I could go back and be like, oh, I remember that, I remember that. But just the ones that stood out to me, I wanted to make a top 10 list of my favorite flips of all time. And it took me a few minutes, but I came up with a lot of them really quick. Now, if I had probably an hour or two to sit down and think a little bit more, I'd probably come up with a few more. But these were the ones on the top of my head, and I think they're really interesting. And I'd love to know your favorite flips in the comments below, so we can kind of treat it as a BOLO list too. When you have those interesting ones that end up making a lot of money, they turn out to be ones that we look for. And I found, if you're a new reseller out there, and you'll find this too, you probably already have if you're watching a show like this, that if you listen to other people and you listen for what they're selling, you immediately start finding that when you're out and about. Even though it's always been there, you've never been looking for it before. So I'm going to give you my top 10 list of my favorite. We'll go like 10 to 1. First, let's start with the runners up. I found a box of corduroy polo hats, vintage corduroy polo hats. And those were really the first hats I ever sold. And it got me thinking about hats for the first time. And they were going for anywhere between $50 and $90 back then. And they were the early corduroy polo hats. They don't go for quite that much now. Matter of fact, they don't even go for close to that much. But I was getting a bunch of money. I think there were 5 of them in that box, and I think I paid $2 for the whole box. And one more on the runners-up list that I remember fondly is an acro agate ashtray lot. They had tons of them displayed, and they were asking like $3 or $4 a piece. And I said, hey, what if I buy every single one? They're like, $1 a piece, you can have them. And I took them all, and I don't remember how many there were. There were less than 100, but there were more than 50. And those things sell really, really well. Matter of fact, they sell better now than they did back then. I think now they're going, depending on the kind, but the kind I had, the oxblood, rectangular shaped acro agate ashtrays, are going for around 30 to 50 bucks, depending on what they look like, what colors they are. So anyway, that was a great flip. But let's get to the top 10. Number 10, let me grab my list. Number 10, if you watch the Commonwealth Picker store, I had to put the Harley shirts that I got for $1 a piece at the Mount Plushmore sale. If you've seen that one, it's got My Pet Monster on the thumbnail. I had to put that in my top 10. To buy a t-shirt for $1 and sell it for 200 bucks is a really, really good one. I also have one that I think I have listed for 125. I'll probably end up taking 100 for it. I think I've already had an offer for 100 and I turned it down. I'll probably end up taking it at this point. And then I have another one for 50, and there's a few more t-shirts in there that were really worth some good money. So that was a good one. The entire Mount Plushmore sale was awesome, but I can't count that as a particular flip. So I'm just going to count those t-shirts together. But even if I don't, the one t-shirt, the American Hog one, sold for 200 bucks. I'm going to try, by the way, and I might already have done it, to put a picture of each of these items. Some of them don't have comps, and I can't show you a picture for them, because there are none on eBay, which means they're probably worth a little bit of money. All right, again, another item that made the top 10 list is, since I've been doing YouTube, 2 John Deere Louisville hats. Now, just don't go out and buy John Deere hats. You got to find the Louisville Hat Company ones, and you got to have the right kind, the right era, You've got to have them in good condition. Well, you don't have to have them in good condition to make money, but you got to have them in good condition to make real money, big money. It's got the thick stitching in it. There's different kinds. There's like a white one with a green deer, and there's a green one with a yellow deer, and there's different kind of patterns, but it's basically the same style of hat with the same patch. And there's a lot of different ones out there that even have branded like certain John Deere companies, you know, from certain cities, and those are worth money too. But this one was the plain Jane one, and they're usually worth around $300. I think that's what I got. I think I got $300 for it. I may have got $250. I can't quite remember. I think I took an offer on one, and one sold full price. Either way, a couple of great flips. One I bought in a lot off of a woman in just a whole box full of hats, and we made a bunch of money off of that. The other one I got from a garage sale. And the other one I got from a garage sale video, and you can see it. I literally tracked down the guy. I saw the guy pay a quarter for it. I think he paid a quarter, maybe 50 cents. And I saw it, and I saw him buy it, and my heart was just pumping. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, this guy must be a great picker. He's picking up the right stuff. He'd already bought a couple things earlier, and he had in his hands that I would have bought. And I'm like, this guy's a great picker. Nope, he had just forgot his hat that day. And so I ended up buying that hat off of him for 20 bucks. I said, hey, will you take 20 bucks? And he was more than happy to give me that hat for 20 bucks. He just made $19.50 really, really quick. That would have been a great video, but the audio got totally screwed up. I must have messed something up. But it's still a fun video if you want to go check that out. The Polo suicide jacket is also something off of a video. I'm surprised, you know, I guess it's probably because these are the things I recall more than anything else. But the Polo jacket was my very first video. And it is awful. I mean, beyond awful. I was just trying to figure out what the heck I was doing. And it sold for $500. So that was a really, really good flip. And they call it the suicide downhill jacket, I guess, because you're going downhill skiing. I don't know. It used to go for around $1,000, and the prices come down significantly. It did have some issues, bleeding issues of colors. So if it wouldn't have had those issues, it would have probably gone for $700 or $800, maybe up to $1,000. It ended up going to Japan, and it's funny because I tell the kids the story. You know, I'm an AP World History teacher, and I talk about Japan. One of the topics is how does the rest of the world react to the power and the influence of Western culture in the 19th century, because it was dominating the world. And Japan is unique in the fact that they adopted Western ways, at least in technology and in dress and in governmental style. They didn't necessarily adopt the entire culture, but they still have an obsession in the Far East over there, in Japan especially, with American style. And so they still buy American clothing, whether it's vintage Levi's, whether it's vintage Polo, or basically just any iconic American clothing brand. They will buy that over there in Japan, and that's where that jacket ended up going. The Pyrex butter print, and I'll put this one, I don't have mine. I wish I would have taken a picture of my listing. I had the full set. And I don't even think there's any full sets out there that have sold lately. I think we got $500 for it, or $450, I can't quite remember. But I paid $1 for that set, and that's in a video as well, one of our popular videos. This one is a flip that happened fairly early on in my eBay career, if you will. Not completely early, but I guess we could figure it out. If we could figure out when the Dukes of Hazzard movie came out, it happened just a few months before that. I started picking around 20 years ago, so this was a few years in. But I was out and about, and I would buy Cobra CB radios, and I would flip them for 25, 30, 40, 50 bucks. Well, I had bought this one, and I brought it home and looked it up, and it was going for like $390, $375. I can't remember exactly, but it was the Dukes of Hazzard one that they had in the General Lee. And I listed it, and it sold that day. I think it was for $375. And that was, at that time, my biggest flip ever. I had sold tons of Nintendo game systems and stuff for like 85, 90 bucks, and tons of games. But that was a big one, and that got me hooked for good. That was one of my favorites. The Dukes, I think it was the 70, I still remember the number, 70, I guess I'll look it up and put it in, 78X maybe? 78X, I think, or 76X, I can't remember. I bought really close to this house about 5 years ago. I bought 110 soda taps, old ones from like I would say late 70s. And it had, you know, Dr. Pepper and Coke and Pepsi and Diet Coke. But I'll see if I can find a picture and put it up for you. 110 of them. And they were trying to sell them. The guy was out there trying to sell them, and I asked him, you know, how much do you want? And I think he was asking $5 a piece, and he had 110. And he walked inside, and his wife looked at me and said, what do you give me for all of them? I said $20, and she handed me the box of 110 of them. I sold one that very day, I think for $30, one of them. So you can see that turned out to be a really, really good one. I don't know the current value. I'll look them up and I'll put them in this one. My guess is it's probably the same. Some of them didn't go for very much. Some of them went for 10, 12 bucks, but some of them went for $30, and I sold probably 20 or 30 for $30 a piece, and the rest of them probably between 10 and $25 a piece. So those are pretty good. Next up is a Polo, and this one I'm not going to be able to find a comp for. I look it up every once in a while. It's a Polo. It's a P-wing. If you've ever seen the Polo stuff, it has a P and a wing, but this is vintage. They come out with a lot of new P-wing stuff, and they did a lot of new Polo Bear stuff that's not real vintage, but this was a real vintage one. I found it at the Goodwill. It was one of my very first clothing purchases at Goodwill. I had just started doing clothing. It was probably 2003 or 4, so it was a long time ago, and I had just started doing clothing, and I found a polo jacket, and it was like a trench coat. It was like a mix between like a trench coat and like a long Letterman's jacket, is the best I could explain it. It was kind of hard to explain. I've only seen 2 or 3 on eBay over the years. I saw a few back in the golden age of polo sales like 5 years ago that were going for over $1,000. If I recall, I got $750 for mine. And so that was a really, really good flip from the Goodwill. That was back when Goodwill had no idea what they were doing. I was just fortunate to find that thing. It did have one little marking on it that was like blue or something. There was a marker or a pin or something on it. But that was really good, and I was really, really happy about that one. I was pretty stoked. I remember using that money to go on a weekend trip, a weekend vacation. So this was something that my mom brought me, Commonwealth Grammy. So if you're listening out there, Grammy, appreciate you. And you brought this back to us here in Virginia, and I think we were at this house, and we haven't been here that long, so it couldn't have been more than, say, maybe 5 years ago. And she usually has a pretty good eye. She's a pretty good picker. Now, she doesn't know the exact value, but she knows things have value. If you've seen me sell Revere ware before, that's because she told me to pick it up. And I thought, really? And she didn't know. She never looked it up on eBay. She just figured that they would sell. And she was right. They don't make a lot of money, but they sell. And she brought a box back. They used to run a storage unit location. Now, they didn't own it. They just managed it. And of course they would be responsible for auctioning the stuff off and whatnot, and sometimes they wouldn't even have bids on some units. And so she was able to, over the years, she would find some things before they threw it out that had some value, and she found something that she brought back to me, and when I saw it, my jaw dropped, and I had no idea what its value was, but I knew that it would have value, and I think she did too. I don't think she realized how much value, but she gave it to me. And I didn't tell her anything. I just went, oh my goodness. And I said, thanks, no problem. And I went and I listed it for her. And we sold that thing, I think within 2 days. It may have been 1 day, and what it was, and we sold it for $800. It was a badge. And when she handed it to me, I'm like, oh, this is a badge, and this is interesting. And I looked at it, it said Disneyland Hotel Chief of Police. And this was not some joke. This was the real deal. This was a badge from the Chief of Police at the Disneyland Hotel. It even had the badge number, and this thing was clearly old. So this is a one-of-a-kind Disney item. I mean, how many of those could possibly be out there? And if there were a bunch out there, they wouldn't all have the same badge number on it, because I'm sure they give the next Chief of Police at the Disneyland Hotel a different badge with a different badge number. At any rate, it was in a storage unit in Payson, Arizona, is where they got it, and they brought it to me. And I didn't know what to put the value on it. I had no idea. I saw a bunch of other badges out there, Disneyland badges, but they were staff badges, or what do they call them? They don't call them staff. They call them Disneyland cast, I think is what they call them. At any rate, that was one of my favorite deals because I was able to give money to my mom. Now I got to keep some of it. She was nice enough, but she was really, really excited about that amount of money, and I was too. So that one stands out to me because that's truly one of those one-of-a-kind items. You're not going to go out there and look that up, and it's not going to be out there on eBay. So some collector got it somewhere. Hey, and number 2 on the list was actually free. It was from a discard pile. You know, I'm a high school history teacher, and so the library sometimes gets rid of stuff. A lot of times it ends up in the social studies department if it's historical in nature, because teachers will grab it. And it had been there for years, apparently. I had asked the department chair at the time if I could have it, and they're like, sure, take it, no problem. I'm like, okay. So I took it home, and this was just a tick before I started doing eBay. And I just liked it. It was great. It was, if I could remember the name of it, The Letters, Papers, and Speeches of Jefferson Davis. And it was like a 10-volume set. And it was the first printing of it. And I kept it. I kept it in my room for a long time. It just was a neat kind of historical piece. I mean, this thing was over 100 years old at the time. Actually, it was much older than 100 years old at the time. So I was happy to have it. When I started selling on eBay, I thought, I bet this thing can bring some value. And I have a rule of thumb, which is unless I'm willing to pay as much for it as it's going to sell for, then I should probably sell it. And I didn't want to sell that, but I got $900 for it. So I don't think they go for that much now. I'll look it up, see if I can find some comps. My guess is I won't be able to find a first printing comp, but maybe we'll see what I can find. All right, some of you who have been around this channel for any length of time, or either of my 2 channels, probably know what number 1 is. So I made a video and I bought 1,500 of these, and so if that doesn't give it away, I don't know what to tell you. But this so far has been my all-time favorite. Now, it will probably end up being my best financial buy of all time. It isn't yet, and it won't be for some time because I've made a lot of money on other items, multiples and things like that. But when these are all sold, it will be my best buy ever. So I bought 1,500 of these. Actually, technically, I bought more than that. I bought 1,500 at one time, and I had already bought, I think, 150 or 200 of them or so. I will disclose the information on how much I paid for these and how much I made on these at some point down the road. And I will tell you what, no matter what I make on them, they've been priceless because they've brought so many good people into our lives. We've made so many good relationships, and it just keeps selling. So we appreciate the Enaman more than the Enaman appreciates us, I'm sure. So at any rate, thank y'all for joining us, and we are glad that you are here, and whichever channel this is on, we appreciate you being here. And thank you all so much for your kindness. Thank you all for joining us on this channel, on the other channel, wherever you join us. We really do appreciate each and every one of you, and we'll see you next time.